Hello everyone, and thanks for joining me for another devlog for Pixel Pirates, my top-down pixel art game about piracy and exploration. As you may have noticed, I was feeling very productive last week, so in addition to posting a video about NPCs and interacting with them, I also posted a video about adding my first enemy into the game. If you haven't yet, I highly recommend checking them out as they dive more into the process of how I actually implemented those systems into the game, and will provide a nice setup for some of the things I hope to get into later in this devlog. For this update, I want to start with beginning the process of switching my map and camera system to be that grid-based like I was talking about in previous devlogs. I feel like this will create a more natural experience for the player as it'll more closely resemble older pixel art games. Now, however, I think it's time to just put on some good background music and get to work designing a few areas, just to make sure the system will work well before I sink too much time into it. It's been about a week since I did my first recording for this devlog, and while it's not a lot, I do have something to show for my time. Firstly, we'll see that the map looks yet again very different than how it has in previous devlogs. The beach looks mostly the same as it has, but now that we have a new tile added, the cliff, we can simulate depth a lot better. These were a complete pain to figure out how to draw, but the depth they add to the game I think is something that the game previously lacked and greatly benefits from. Adding them to the game is also really easy, which is super nice. All you have to do is just add them to a collision layer, put the shadow on a layer where the player can walk in front of it, and voila, you have a pretty convincing cliff. You just put a little staircase in, and you get a pretty convincing illusion of depth, where the player can walk up and down different cliffs, while the player still stays on the same Z layer. Pretty cool if you ask me. The second change I made to the map is something that isn't visible at all, or at least isn't for now. If we open up our map bounds folder, we'll see that instead of the complex shapes we had before, our map is now a rectangular shape with its vertexes aligned perfectly mapped to the corners of the tiles. This prevents a lot of that janky camera movement we were seeing before, where it could get caught on map bounds and quickly jump after uncatches. This also makes the map tab create a nice and smooth rectangle to represent our map bounds. With the prettier map now implemented, I want to go back to that slime creature I made in last devlog and give it the ability to actually damage the player and the player to actually damage it. I'm honestly not sure how we'll go about making this system, but I will check back in when I have some progress of note. It's been about 3 or 4 days since that last update, and I'm honestly really excited to share the progress I've made. What started out as just wanting to implement some basic combat mechanics has now turned into a pretty robust and pretty flexible system. I think that will serve a pretty strong foundation for future enemy encounters. I think the most logical place to start here is with the health system. Both the player and the slime now have individual health values, and they can both take and deal damage. This system is modular and can differ from enemy type to enemy type. So for example, I currently have the slime to have 30 health, and the player has 50 health. I can always change that if the player gets an ability to raise them up to 100. Right now, damage is a flat number, but down the line, I want to add things like critical hits, resistances, and damage to be a range of values. For example, instead of a sword dealing 10 damage every single hit, it might deal between 8 and 12 damage per hit. It still averages out to about 10 damage per hit, but I think some variation will make it feel like there's actually some difference with this weapon, and that sometimes you can get lucky and sometimes you can get unlucky, which gives some excitement. Next up is the knockback effect. Every time the slime takes a hit, they get pushed slightly away from the attacker. This might sound like a small detail, and realistically it is, but it does add a lot to make combat feel more dynamic and more responsive. It helps sell the idea that there's real impact and there's force behind each attack, rather than just numbers ticking down on a health bar. What I didn't expect, though, was just how much math would end up being involved to get this to feel right. The basic idea is pretty straightforward in theory, but implementing it smoothly took a lot of work. So here's how I went about tackling it. Imagine you have two vectors, one for the attacker's position and one for the defender's position. In this case, the attacker is the player and the defender is the slime. If you subtract the attacker's position from the defender's position, you get a vector that points from the attacker to the defender. Normalize that vector, and now you've got a unit vector pointing away from the attacker. Essentially, that's the direction the knockback should go. Once you have that direction, you can scale it by whatever knockback distance you want, and boom, you got the velocity vector and where it should land you. For me, I decided to do this with a velocity to the rigid body, so I then divided it by time and then did that over a set amount of time, so that way it gives it a little push effect. There's still a lot of tweaking I need to do in order to get it to look right, but overall I'm pretty excited with how it looks so far. There were some other small tweaks I ended up having to do in order to get this to work just right, but that's the giant overview of this system. Overall, I'm incredibly happy with where things are right now. The combat loop is still very basic. I mean, you walk up to the slime, press attack, it takes damages and flashes, and if you're too slow, it can do the same to you. But already, it feels fun and in a way that's really encouraging. I still need to add some death states, enemy reactions to being hit, and maybe even some audio feedback, but for just the few days I put into this, I think this is a huge step forward. I think my next step, and the last thing I'll do for this devlog, is try to work on the UI a little bit, and try to make a little health bar system for the player. I'm not sure what design I'm going to go for, but I'll try a few things out and I'll let you guys know when I have something to show. Wow, so I actually ended up not spending very long with this at all, surprisingly enough. If you look towards the upper left-hand corner of the player screen, we'll now see a little UI bubble with a few different indicators. We have a little circular piece of art to show this area holds information about the health, and to its right we see two bars, one for health and one for stamina. Currently, stamina is not used, but the health bar actually has a really cool feature built within it. If we wander towards our little slime friend over there and get hit, we'll see that our health bar actually drains in proportion to how much health we have left. So currently, we have 50 health and take 10 damage, so a fifth of our health goes away. If we have 100 health and get hit, then a tenth will go away, and things like that. This system did not take very long at all to create, and in total took about 2 hours. That includes the art and setting things up within the scripts. What I really like about this system is that it's completely self-sufficient in that it does all the calculations itself and adjusts to different max health values. This devlog took a little bit longer to get out, but I'm extremely pleased with what we got out of this. We now have an even better map design, the abilities to deal and take damage, and a way to visually track that damage. This has been without a doubt one of my most productive devlogs, and one of them I've been most excited about. And I'll definitely keep some time and just wander around admiring this little world I'm starting to create. If you guys enjoyed, please consider liking this video. It really means a lot to me to see all of y'all enjoying the content I'm putting out. Also, let me know in the comments if you guys would be interested in seeing videos discussing some of the scripts and mechanics I've implemented, such as combat, health bar, or enemy movements, in more depth. With all that said, I hope everyone has a great day, and I will see you all in the next devlog.